really seems to do well.
Props and feedback both seem to be
Yeah.
kind of goal setting, not so much.
Yeah.
That's maybe scary or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was interesting. Did you have a?
Is he the only one who's checking in?
Yes, he is the only one.
Singled out at all? We have the good fortune of having 3 kids who have to check in and check out.
Yeah.
There's none of that, oh gosh, I'm the bad kid.
Maybe, and I thought of that, and one day I ended up, it was in the morning, and I was just happening to walk down the hall, so I kind of did a check-in with him around his peers and did a check-in with some of the other kids around him to see if that would make a difference, and it did not.
Like we could bring a friend with him to check in.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I think just because we saw such a difference this week in his behavior, we were kind of like, what's going on? And maybe we shouldn't try this and see if his behavior does continue. We'll go back to it and maybe do that initial check-in with him. Maybe, trying with some of his peers or something like that would be a good idea. So we'll see. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. So many of, maybe all of, what we do for intervention plans is trial and error. What we're hoping is that we kind of think logically and use some functional assessment logic so that our trials are not just absolutely random grab out of a hat, but something that's more likely to make a difference. But then you think of a kid who looks like check-in, check-out would be a great thing, and for some reason, even though everything points to it, it doesn't, then you get rid of it because it's not working, you get rid of it. But it's always, no matter how you do this, some sort of a trial and error at the end. Next.
For that, is a week a good time? How do you know, one day, obviously,
Right. There is no rule of thumb for how long we should have to try this before we decide it's working or not working. But if you've got a long history and you put something in place, and beginning when you put it in place, things are different, yeah, it's possible that something else in the environment happened at the same time, so that's why I'd pull it out. And if when you pull it out, that goes away, I would say that confirms that had something to do with it. If you pull it out and it doesn't go away, then I think we start thinking about how we could put it back in, but maybe change it when we put it back in to make it help solve the problem. But there isn't a magic number of it's got to be a week or 5 days or a month, or it just depends on whatever you think is logical based upon how much time we've seen. So it's a guess.
There was one student on check-in, check-out that we had, and he was so upset about being put on check-in, check-out because he didn't want his friends to know. So we had to figure out how to do it secretly.
The secret check-in, check-out.
Secret check-in, check-out. He had a signal from the teacher to mark his tally because he was tallying his own following directions goal. And when it was marked, he was in his book, he could do it. And he got 100%. That wasn't even the goal. The goal was an 80% thing. And he had 100% for 2 weeks, and he's been great ever since.
So you're using check-in, check-out as the stick that you hold over his head.
It was not meant as a punishment.
Do well, or you have to be on check-in, check-out.
No.
Hey, whatever works. Next.
I don't think I need that.
No, this is for the camera.
Oh, sure. I didn't know we were supposed to bring anything this week because I wasn't here last time, so I'm just kind of taking this off my head. We had a student, she was a freshman last year, that came in, and we were having some serious behaviors as far as she would come into the classroom, she would have these explosive behaviors where she would start yelling, arguing with the teacher, and it would take a while to calm down, and then the whole day with all of the other students in the classroom, the whole day was just a mess. You couldn't get anything done because you were handling her behavior the whole time. We did a functional analysis of all this. We took data, and what we found out from it was It was basically happening in unstructured times when she was out in the hall, and then she would have to come back in. And we looked at her social skills, that we needed to do some developing with that also. So at the end of last year, we decided to put in place this year the check-in and check-out, which we have been doing. We started that at the beginning of the year. Basically with her though, it's more she checks out at the end of the hour with each teacher, and it has been working pretty well. We've only had this year so far one explosive behavior, and it was back in September when we first started school. So that seems to be working okay. However, now we're dealing with a separate issue. This past summer, the student has been in several foster homes, and she's been in, this is her third since she's been a freshman that she's in now. And over the summer, we have some cutting issues now that have come up into this. And I'm in constant contact with her caseworker, her social workers, the social workers at the school, trying to get something in place for this student. As far as behaviors with the check-in, she likes this because she gets the attention. That's part of all of us. She has the attention, and she's doing very well with that, and she likes the attention. Now, however, we're back to, there's a lot of things going on outside of the classroom. The classrooms have been pretty structured, but there's a lot of things happening outside in the home, and they are expecting us to deal with this, and we can't. And now we're kind of at a point where I've just recently put in place some services. We actually had a grant that we got for an extra social worker, and she just happens to be, her specialty is cutting. So she has agreed to see this student once a week. However, she says that she needs more outside, which we have been telling her caseworkers, and we have been telling, and nobody's doing anything about it. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We have this plan, and it seems to be working. Now what I'm seeing though also is her grades. Last year her grades were pretty good in all classes except for one because she didn't like it. But now this year she's just kind of getting by. So we're seeing some other, other things that are going on as far as we try to use, positive statements with her because she has some depression issues now that we're looking at too. So what I'm, kind of questioning is how do we get DCFS and how do we get them to provide the services that they're supposed to be providing for this person? Because they keep telling us, well, oh, you're doing this, and it's no, they need to be providing more because she's supposed to be seen once a week by a social worker, but it's not happening, even outside of the school. So that's kind of where we're at right now. The plan seems to be working, and I think we're gonna try to do some modifications. We do have her, something that I kind of foresaw happening with her. She's doing this plan, and basically she's kind of self-monitoring. And last year, part of it too was she was blaming us, blaming others for not getting things done or her behavior happening. And I'm seeing this year what I've noticed in the past 3 weeks, because the past 3 weeks have not been good in outside situations, that she's not filling out this plan. She's not filling out the behavior part, her papers every day for her classes, because there are things in it that aren't done. And she's not coming back and blaming us, but she's kind of being quiet about it. She's not saying a whole lot about why she's not finishing it, and we just go through the papers together, and I say, oh, well, this was really good, you had a great week, and really we're focusing on behavior part of it. So I've just noticed that now because she's not doing so well and it is going down, she's not filling out the papers anymore, and she's got to be really prompted to fill them out every day. So that's kind of where we're at.
Do other people have interaction with child, family?
Yeah, DCFS. Yeah, this is Catholic Charities. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interaction with them?
Well, a little bit, but it would seem to me that since they're the parent in the situation, that you bringing a serious issue like cutting up to them and them not doing something, how about going to the supervisor?
That's what, and that's...
Especially
And that's where, because when the student came back at the beginning of the year and I called the caseworker to let her know, because we had an issue, that was the day we had the explosive behavior that one day, and I had called immediately because she said, I feel like I want to cut myself. So I I let I let the people know at school about this, and then I also called her caseworker. Her caseworker had no idea she'd been cutting herself in the summer. It's like, okay.
Cutting, I thought you meant skipping class.
No, cutting. No, she is cutting herself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, well, but they're not doing anything. I mean, they're expecting us to take care of this, and we're really having some issues with this.
How about, did you go to their supervisor?
No, I have not yet. I have just called the supervisor. See, and this is the first time I have ever dealt with DCFS, so I was very shocked. I mean, other people say, oh, don't be shocked, but I was very shocked because I thought, oh, they should be giving her, they have these services available for this girl. And then it was very interesting because we also, last year when they evaluated her, they added on, to addition to being hearing, deaf and hard of hearing, they added on emotional disturbance also because she's had a lot of things happen outside of the home. And then when they added this, they didn't add any service for this to the IEP. And I brought this up with my supervisor that we cannot be doing this, that we need to make sure. What they tried to do was put on one of our language therapists to deal with social issues for behavior management. That's what, and I'm like, no. And I mean, I kept arguing to the point to my supervisor was kind of fed up with me, but I thought, you know what, no. Because the IEP says she has this. Aren't we supposed to be providing services for, isn't she supposed to be getting some help for this? So now we do have the social worker that is, and she told me the first time she met with a student, she said she needs behavior, anger management strategies. Hello, I know, that's what I've been trying to tell them. That was not my specialty, and I kept saying, I'm not trained for all the anger management part of it and all of that, and this therapist is not either. And we've tried to argue the point that we need somebody else that's trained in this needs to be doing this. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and with the DCFS and everything, so.
And it seems to me a kid in foster care who also is on an IEP, isn't there a court-appointed special advocate needs to be involved in all their IEP meetings and report back to the court?
There is. Okay. There is an advocate. So, all right.
Do others have examples of when
DCFS.
when they don't do exactly what you think they should be doing, of how So what's your suggestion?
Well, there is no getting assistance from DCFS, basically. They're different in the different areas of the state. They're more cooperative and more helpful, but they really just do anything to cost them the least amount of money.
Is there no way to pressure them into doing something?
No. Okay. So cops, I had a 10-year-old boy who's being left alone every day. I probably trained him to call the cops every night. And so the cops had like 30 reports of coming to his house, and the parents weren't there. And then, so then they would take him to DCFS office, and every night it'd be the same thing. They would wait until the parent finally came home, then they would give them back to them, and every day it was the same thing. But anything, in my opinion, anything that's going to cost them money, they're not doing. So DCFS is not an answer.
But if it's the only answer we got, at least the DCFS has a deaf and hard of hearing contact person, Marcia Northrup. Have you contacted her?
I didn't know that
We go to
name.
her with our complaints, and sometimes she helps to get the ball rolling.
Martha North. Okay.
The trouble with DCFS is they require 3 injuries that are going to, an injury is something that is a print or a mark on the body that's going to last 36 hours or longer, and they require 3 positive confirmations of that before they ever even consider relocating the child to grandma's house, who, is not usually allowed for assistance. So it's like you can't get them to found 1 case, let alone found 3 cases. I mean, it's such a roadblock.
The difference here, though, is this kid's already under DCFS.
Yeah. She's already in the foster system. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
I would, without
Okay.
a doubt, that's where I've had some success. You
Okay.
gotta you don't even waste any more time.
On her, just go above. And I do have that contact. I do have, because I have talked with her before.
You'll probably get a response almost immediately from the supervisor. also I would see something right to Catholic Charities or caseworker also. Because if she's Catholic Charities.
She is, and that's where her caseworker, and see, we had a little situation too last year. We had a meeting in our dean's office where the caseworker basically told her in front of myself, the dean, and the other teacher that you can call her a bitch, and you can call her a racist, whatever you want, because she accused one teacher of touching her and then another one, me, of screaming in her face. But you can't lie and mess with people's jobs. And I was like, oh, okay. That's teaching her really well. So, yeah.
Over the advocate, Patrick, the advocate, Patrick Murphy, the guardian's office. I actually faxed a letter to all three, DCFS supervisor, Catholic Charities, and then the guardian's office. Oh my God, they were all over the case.
Really?
But,
okay.
And just say fax though. And
okay. Thank you for
supervisor, they will be there.
Thank you for that information. Yeah. Oh.
The social worker now is involved and is recommending some more services. Then he has the social worker talk with the caseworker or going to staff.
And she is. She's actually filling out in the process right now, the new one, filling out a form so she can contact them.
You forgot your treat.
Here's the number for the DCFS person.
You guys are so great. Thank you. Thanks.
Do you want to try to do more, or do you want to break?
We just take a peek outside and see
Okay.
it's right here. Yes, it's all set up, so
Okay.
we just got some lunch.
So we're
Do you want to say anything before lunch?
No. What time are we coming back from lunch?
We're going to do 45 minutes, 12:15 to 1. And if you could go out this door and then go to the end of the table.
Information, and then continue on again with the case studies. What I'd like to do is to take just a step back for a second and go into what do we do once we've collected the data, which I think is coming up in some of your case studies. We've collected the data. Here's what it says. What does that mean? What do we do? Is that enough? Is it too much? Do we do more? Do we do less? Do we... And I want to take it back to thinking about the learning curve. The data you have tells you what to do if something goes wrong, generally is the way we think about it. What do we do if this doesn't work? Well, then we need to do what? Or what if we do if it does work is the one we don't talk about. When the one if it does, what if we do if it does work is usually then we move up one. What do we do if our data says that kid is really able to get it? They can really understand this. They can demonstrate it all the time. Then we need to move up to a goal that's about fluency, which means we may need to change our data collection methods to get a better index of how fluent is that kid. Or if we find out this is really working, we might say then we need to change our data collection methods a little bit to get a better index of maintenance or generalization. We generally don't worry too much beyond that point. So what I had done, if you brought your microscope with you, I put this in your handouts. I don't know what size it is in your hand. It's pretty small in your hand. It's not. There's a different one. But this is in a thing that I wrote for a journal called Focus on Exceptional Children, which I can get you the citation for it if you want to go hunt it down, but it looks probably as small in the journal as it is here. But these are decisions that you can make based on data, and just kind of wanted to go through them briefly. So this says, you determine what your criteria is for success, this top line. So you've written your objective, and it says, if we get this much of this, we think it's working. So then you, second box, go out and watch. Monitor behavior with your data collection system. And here's the outcomes that are possible, success or failure. The first one is, we put it in place, the kid never did any of it. The kid has never even done any of this at all ever since we tried teaching it. Then it says, as possibilities, maybe that kid doesn't possess the prerequisite skills to be able to do that thing. So maybe what we need to do is go back and teach those prerequisites. No, they're not going to be able to do that thing you're asking them to do because they can't do this yet. So maybe we started them out too high. Or maybe the replacement behavior we're giving them to do is just going to be too hard for them and we need to come back with a simpler one, which is what someone mentioned earlier, I think with the one about, what was it, wanting them to stay in their seat as a replacement for running away from school. So maybe if that's not working, he's never staying in his seat. Maybe we'd come back and say, well, then maybe we need a different replacement behavior. Or maybe there's a prerequisite there, which probably isn't a prerequisite for knowing how to sit in your seat. But the second one was the students started doing it, but then they stopped. We put the program in place, kids started doing it, then it just stopped working. And generally when that happens, what we say is some part of a rule got misconstrued in there. So at some point, we got this going, they were teaching it, they were learning it, and then something, they have a misrule in here somewhere. Somewhere along the line, they started thinking, oh, but if I do it this way, it'll be better. And for some reason, they started doing it that way. That some reason is probably functional. The other kids started laughing at them when they did it the wrong way. So now they're going off the wrong way. So what we would typically do if they started but then stopped is go back, find where that error is, and reteach that thing. Now that, if it's functional, is also going to mean you're going to have to mess with the environment so that thing's not functional anymore to do it the wrong way. But it involves reteaching a component that we've already taught. That wasn't the problem, this wasn't the problem. Next one would be student engages in the behavior, but they're really inconsistent. Some days they're 100%, some days 0. It's usually hit or miss. It's not like they're in the 50s. They are up or down. They either do it or they don't. Generally, when we talk about inconsistency, we talk about reinforcers. That's where we're really going to talk about function. Why will this kid do it completely perfect one day and can't do it at all the next? Look at reinforcers. What's in it for the kid to do it right? And what's in it for the kid to do it wrong? Does doing it wrong mean I get to have the pretty young instructional assistant come talk to me? Does doing it wrong mean the teacher sends me away and I don't have to do the lesson anymore? What are the reinforcers for doing it right and doing it wrong? The issue is here, when we get to a situation like this, it isn't a teaching issue because they know how to do it. And they do it perfectly right a lot of times, and then boom, it goes away. So don't spend your time teaching and reteaching like we did up here. They've got it. When we find the real inconsistencies, and again, I'm not talking about somewhere between 40 and 60, I'm talking about big differences. Doing it, not doing it. Look at function and reinforcers. That's the decision you'd make from that data. Next one down would be natural events compete with the behavior path. We've got this all set up, the kid can do it, but then something else happens during the day that screws it all up. And so I heard some people this morning talking about things like didn't get enough sleep last night. That event in the real world screwed up our whole pathway here. Everything was working unless they didn't get enough sleep. Then you have to start thinking, how do we change things that are going on? And you always have two possibilities. Overpower that thing that's going on, or figure out a way to control for it. Controlling for it is always going to be easier. I mean, you could say, what, the kid didn't get no sleep last night? Well, offer him $1,000 today. You can do that, and you can overpower. It's very expensive and really hard to fade out. You're better off to say, and there's a couple of articles that Rob Horner has about something like this, with a very similar circumstance to what somebody was mentioning, that they'd found out a girl with some significant disabilities in high school would have these horrible tantrum days if she had a poor night of sleep. So what they instituted was parents call in the morning and say, uh-oh, watch out, bad night last night. And the whole school sets up a different environment. And by whole school, I mean the school where that kid goes. So they're waiting for her at the door, and they guide her into a room where they sit down and have a conversation with her and just kind of ease their way into the day. And what they've said is, we understand that when this thing is in the environment, all the instruction goes out the window. And when all the instruction's going out the window, we know that kid's going to fail. And so we have to have a different set of environmental events on those days. Now, the key is in knowing what those things are. And we do basically start out by guessing. It looks to me like on those days, and a type of functional assessment called a brief FA simply means, well, let's watch those things under these conditions and then watch them under these conditions and really see if there's a difference. If there is, put the one in place that makes it work. If there's not, you got to keep looking for it. But if you know that they can do it, and they always do it except for under these specific conditions, when we've identified those conditions, we've identified the kind of things we can do to change that environment. But what a lot of people will try to do is they'll just up the ante. Okay, well, when they start doing that, we'll suspend them for 3 days instead of 2. And it just doesn't work very well. Change the environment rather than changing the consequences there. Last one, student is very close, but not quite. Here's what we'd like to do. When I write an objective, what I like to do is always think of time at the bottom here. And performance up the ordinate. Then what I like to do is say, where are they right now? What's my criteria? I'll say, well, right now they are, let's say, on task. Right now they're on task. This will be percent of time. About 40. Okay, so we're right here and they're 40. What would you like? We'd like 100. Yeah, well, I would too, but you know what? That's a long ways to go. 100, how far out? Let's say these are weeks. So somewhere down here is end of the year. Yeah, 100 by end of the year would be great. Let's assume that's reasonable to think. We've got enough time that by the end of the year we should have 100. I don't know if 100 would be reasonable for any kid ever, but let's say that's where we're going. If all I do is say, okay, I want 100 at the end of the year, and we go through the year, well, we're doing well, we're going, how's the kid doing? I don't know, I haven't measured it yet. And we get to the end of the year and we measure right here, and the kid's at 42. What have we wasted? 1, 2, 3. We've wasted a ton of time. Wouldn't it have been better to know that that kid was not going to make it? How far back here could we go and say the kid wasn't going to make it? If I said right here on week 2, kid was at 42, would you say they're never going to make it? No. By week 2, by week 3, what's the rule? What rule could we use to say that kid's not going to make it? We have a rule for that. Here's what you should do. Think out, what do I want? By when? What's reasonable? So let's say we make a more reasonable effort at this and we say we'd like him within the end of the quarter to be at 75. Okay, then I would count out your quarter. How many weeks are in a quarter? 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Then I would say, what did we say we wanted? 75. Draw a line from where you are now to there. Every week when you look at data, is that kid on track to make it? They have to be on or above this line. It's that simple. You just simply draw a line out there, and every time you can go look at your data any day. You're plotting your data every day, and your data is probably, even with a kid it's really working on, you're going to have data all over the place here. Well, what I would like to do is, at any point in time, I'd look and say, is our data progressing up that line? If it is, we're on the verge of making it. But if I look and see data like this, why should I wait until the end of the quarter to do something different? Hey, we said end of the quarter, we can't. No, it's not working. We need to do something different now. And generally what we say is you need to create a rule for yourself. In the literature, the generally accepted rule that people use is if you are below this line for 3 consecutive days, we should stop. And we should say, hey, it's not working. And you go over here and you say, which of these things seems to be going on? Did we get this? We've got, wow, it really worked. And then, no, it didn't. And then, yeah, it did. And then, no, it didn't. I wouldn't wait for 3 days below here. You might not ever get 3 days below. But I would look at that and say, what we've got going on here is this huge variability. Engagement behavior inconsistent. We need to look at function and reinforcers here. If we get this thing started and the kid's data goes like this, I'm going to say, we never saw it. We said we taught them to do this, they were only doing this, we taught them to do it better, it never happened. Then I'm going to say, well, it's this one, it never happened. Or we get a data pattern that looks like this. In which case we say, hey, it was working for a while, but something right here happened. What was it? I'd call people in and say, what date was this? What happened last Monday? And everybody goes, oh, that's the day that, okay, now if we've taken this, instead of it being here, maybe now we're here. We found out there was a specific thing that got in the way in the environment. Or maybe whatever we were teaching on that day confused the kid and they went off on a different path, so we'd have to reteach something. But what we do is we use the data we collect to make those kind of decisions. So what if they're doing it the right way? Students met the entire objective. So we go in and we measure behavior today, and the kid is at 80%. Like, how many days in a row should a kid need to be at 80% before you'd say it's good enough to celebrate and never talk about this again? I mean, if you said, I want this kid to be on task 100% by the end of the quarter, and you took data the next day and the kid was at 100%, would you just wad this up and throw it away and never talk about on task again? Or would you say, there was a rare, weird day, and I'm not convinced that I'm going to ever see it again? How many times in a row should you see it, or how many times out of a number of days should you see it before you say, we're done with that? That's what goes into your objective. When you say things like 80% for 3 consecutive days, or 80% when looking at the last week, or what do you want? How many times? Generally, once is not enough. You want to be able to see that they're actually holding some pattern. So you've got to set that. If they've done everything you've asked them to do, then we are done. And then it's time to move on to something completely different. The student uses it consistently, but they have trouble when they go to other places or when other people come in here to work with them on it, which is a generalization issue, which says we need to build in generalization into our instruction. So when we get busy to do this again, our next objective should say, student will, given that we're in another place, or given that we've got other people coming in here, or given that we use problems they've never seen before, student will, blah, blah, blah. So what we're doing now is changing the conditions of our instruction to say we're looking for generalization. And we create a new one. If we ended right here, say, okay, now we're going to do the same thing, start here, we're going to go out to here, but this time, instead of what we were doing last time where it's all the same, these ones are all with generalization ones. These ones are all with problems they've never seen before. Or these ones are all with different people coming into the room. Or these ones are all have to be out in the real world, not just in the classroom. So you change your objective based upon what happened. So student uses it consistently but limited. Student uses it consistently with prompts. Then what you might want to say is, okay, on our next one, same thing, but this time without prompts. Okay, what did it take to make them successful? And then say on the next one, do a little less. We're working on maintenance now. Can we get them to continue to do it when we're not giving them these extra cues? and prompts. Students met the objectives for skill acquisition. That means, okay, now can we get them to continue doing it and be more fluent with it? Where they can do it really right away. When we ask them a question, they don't have to stop and think for a long time. They can answer us correctly. And student making satisfactory progress, do nothing. If, unless this yellow will show up, if this is your kid and here's your data, the yellow, what do you do if you're right there and you see that data? You don't change anything. You're in teaching and you're collecting data, and your data says, never fallen below for 3 days in a row, and if we continue on this trajectory, we're going to meet our goal. Then don't change anything. But if you met your goal already up here, change to a different goal. Why keep teaching something that you already know? If you said, well, we're teaching 2 + 2 to this kid, and he got it the first day, but we're not supposed to be done with this till the end of the quarter, so we're going to keep teaching it to him for the rest of the quarter. Would that make any sense? And it wouldn't make sense either to say, we're teaching this kid to stay in their seat and they're already doing it, but we're going to keep doing it because we were supposed to take this out to the end of the quarter. When it's done, change it. If it's not working, change it. If it is working, that's when we want to leave it alone. So this thing is simply a way of saying, every time you look at your data, there's a decision to be made. It's going great in a number of ways. It's going poorly in a number of ways, or it's working. In any case, you make a decision. What do we do next? And if you're doing this right, every decision is based on the data. So it will not be enough just to collect that data. We must represent that data in a way that allows us to make decisions. That usually is with a graph. And the simplest way of doing a graph is this time-based one, where you simply put performance on the ordinate, time on the assistant, and every day or every week or every whatever you collect data, go and put a dot on this thing and see how you're doing. If you're doing great, great. If you're not, you don't really need to have a team meeting all the time to look at this if you've got the graph. I would bring the team together when it's completely working or when we decide it's not working. Why do you all need to get back together and talk if it's going fine? So I would use your team meeting time to talk about kids that are here or anywhere down here, but don't need to use it to talk a lot about kids that are doing great, except to say, keep it up. This is working well. Questions about that?
That we write yearly where we do, say, quarter checks for actually sending home IPs. Is it more beneficial if it's a behavior that's not academic to say at quarter one that I'm hoping I'm going to see 80% performance of the behavior one consecutive day, and then the second quarter, if my goal is 4 to 5 consecutive days of the week, do it by that? Or would I follow my line and say I would hope at quarter one to see it 45% of the time, and in quarter two, 65% of the time, and by quarter three, it's stuck in that our IEPs are kind of written that way, that we have 4 boxes, and quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four, depending on when your IEP is. So I'm saying, do I rather than attain it one day the first time so that we've had a good day, or the second day is not as important as percentage of time doing it?
Well, it depends on the kid and the skill. Probably I can't conceive of behaviorally a kid who does the right thing one day at the rate we wanted and us just being happy with that. Your worst kids can have a good day, and that doesn't mean problem solved. So I want to see some maintaining of that. If you're writing an acquisition goal, can the kid do something they've never done before? If they can do it once, I think that's significant. Most of us probably aren't writing acquisition behavior goals. We're probably writing maintenance behavior goals, which means they've got the behavior. They know how to say no. We've seen them say no. The words come out of their mouth. And we can get them to do it over time, but when you put them in the real world and someone comes up and says, want drugs, it doesn't work there. So what we need is a goal for generalization, which is a form of maintenance as a generalization over time. So basically, you're probably not looking at acquisition or fluency. If you were, could we get this kid to, I'm trying to think of a behavior that, engage in conflict resolution steps when someone comes up and calls them a name. Okay, well, even that, it would be generalization, because you wouldn't ask them to do that unless they demonstrated it to you first that they could do it. So your first, to be an acquisition goal there, it would have to be kid can demonstrate to me that they know the steps to conflict resolution. And if they can do that once, I'll say, yes, they've acquired it. But I don't think you're probably writing those goals when you write your IEPs. I think you're writing generalization. Right. If you looked at it like this, think of this is where we are now. We're in the basement. We'd like to be up on the top floor, which is kid doing great. But what we've got to do is go up the stairs to get there. This first step is very likely acquisition. Can they demonstrate that they get it? Fluency. If I ask them again and have them do something on a piece of paper with it, they do it really fast. They get it. They've done this enough times, it just flies off their tongue. Can they remember it? And then here is, will they actually do it? You know, we all have that social skills. We bring kids into social skills group and we teach them how to conflict resolve. And we get them to be fluent with it because we do it so much. And then we practice other things and they can remember what to do. Then they got in the real world and they never do any of that stuff. That last one, though, remember, you will never get them to generalize a skill that they never learned in the first place. Most of your IEP goals for behaviors, though, are this. Will they do it somewhere? We really don't write a lot of goals for, if they go to social skills group, they'll be able to demonstrate to us that they can do it, which is really what we should be writing if they can't. I would say 90+% of the time kids can, and they don't for functional reasons. And so we write generalization goals. This is a really long way of saying I'm not sure that I've answered any of your question at all. I think it depends.
Chart just seems like it makes a really easy way to divide up a school year as well. You know, you would just say, where is quarter one on 36 weeks, where is quarter two, and that's what you would hopefully would need. Is that unrealistic? Are they going to go to school each quarter?
Well, if you said, here's quarter one, here's quarter two, here's quarter three, here's quarter four, and we still draw our line, but now we draw it out to quarter four, you can say, then, my short-term objective is this. At the end of 9 weeks, kid will be at 45%. At the end of 18 weeks, kid will be at 55%. At the end of, and you can see where that would be. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to be able to do it that way. Assuming that kids learn fairly straight, generally if you were looking at something going out over a year, it's probably going to progress more like a learning curve. Which means you would expect they're going to be a little slower here than they are up here. Which means you might want to bring your goal down a bit on each of these, figuring it's going to spurt toward the end. But you also have this could happen. You get your team together, you come in, you look at this data. Where do I put these pins? Right there. Here's our aim star. Here's where we started. You draw that line. And we look at our data, and we come in and we meet after 1 quarter. And the data is right here. We've been below it for a long time. We've actually broke our rule a long time ago. What would you decide to do if you were on the team that looked at this data? So you've got a kid that's been having horrible problems. And we want it to look like this and less like this. and it wasn't working, but it's caught up, it's progressing, what would you say? I would too. I'd say I would want to watch it. I'm not going to go, well, we broke our rule, forget it. Yeah, we broke our rule, but we're really close. And I don't know that I would want to mess with something that's that close. That's different than if we were seeing that, which says we've leveled off. We are below if all you did was this. Let's change our goal from 75% to 72%. And redraw your line. Now we're going great. And that's one of the decisions you could make. We think maybe we just set our goal too high. The kid's doing well, and if our goal was just a little less, that kid would be doing super. Now, I'm not suggesting that no matter what you see here, you just go, oh, well, just drop the aim star down here. Hey, things are going great. But there are times when you could say, maybe we could just adjust this a little. But I wouldn't be so hard and fast and concrete-headed that you go in and say, no, 3 days below, we change. It's a thoughtful process that your team goes through and looks at and says, what do you guys think? Where are we? If I were here on this one, I might say, let's give it a little more time. And if it continues to increase, but right below the line, I'd let it go. What this means is you're going to go an extra week to get it. Big deal. You're going all year. I'd take that. So you kind of have to play with those decision rules as you get there. Questions? Okay, so what we'd like to do is jump back into some case studies. What we'd like you to do, if you could bring up your case studies again and kind of talk through them. And what we'd like to kind of end with, if we could, with each of your case studies is a plan up here of, so what do you think you're going to measure? And what would be we'll just make something up. It's not like you have to go home with this, but what might be a reasonable objective for you to set for the kid you're talking about? And how could we plot that on a graph? And what might that aim line look like? So you could think about how that could be measured for the kid that we're talking about. So I've given you more things to think about. Who would like to volunteer to go first this afternoon? And remember, you get one of these. Don't make us come out there and grab you and pull you up here.
I just have a question. I don't know. I'm sorry.
No, we're not answering any questions until someone volunteers. Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Let's say a student was in 6th grade and they had done a BIP at that time. He's moved to 7th grade now, different set of teachers, different set of circumstances, and the behavior is not as much there, not shown as much there.
The problem or the good behavior?
The bad behavior is not there. It's always, showing good behavior. How do you get rid of a BIP? How do you say he doesn't really need a BIP at this time? We could just go back to like functional analysis maybe, or doesn't that ever happen? Is it once a BIP, always a BIP?
When you say BIP, what you're saying is we have an intervention plan in place. Right. And generally we use the word BIP to denote the fact that it's based on a functional assessment.
Right.
So what we're saying is this kid had a functional assessment which gave us a testable explanation hypothesis of behavior that we then used to develop an intervention plan based on function. Now, we put that plan in place, we're collecting data. And what you're saying is, this is good behavior we're looking at here. Good behavior went up. And it's at or above where you thought it should be to be a success. So it's right here. So what do we do next? That's the question. Mm-hmm. Okay, so how did I do that? So then the question is, which of these ones have we done? Is it student has met the entire objective and everything is great? Or is it The student uses it consistently, but still has some limitations in using it with other people or in other places? Or is it student uses it consistently, but we give them a lot of reminders to get that to happen? Or is it student has met the objective just for skill acquisition only and not for using it quickly or remembering it or anything else? So which of these best fits the scenario you're talking about?
I think we have, the problem Stuart's just talking about, the problem we have is the functional analysis doesn't even fit. He's in a new placement now, and the whole functional analysis is all wrong because this is all written about these outbursts, and now those don't exist, so we should.
Doesn't matter. If you did an FBA and the BIP is working, don't do another FBA. No point to it. Everything's working. The only reason for doing an FBA, one reason, to develop a BIP that'll work. The BIP is working, there is no need to do any functional anything. So if what you're telling me is he's in a new situation, everything's different, but everything's working, then I wouldn't do any other assessment. What I would try to do is figure out, do I yank this plan because it's completely settled and the kid's doing it? Or do I say it's more like he's doing it, but we're giving him lots of reminders, and so our next step is to keep him going, but try to ease out the reminders, back those off. Or is it he's doing really well, but we're not really asking him to do it in new situations yet. So he's doing great, 100%. Let's start introducing some generalized kind of examples slowly. So what you do is decide, where are we? If you've done acquisition, fluency, maintenance, generalization, and this kid's doing great with all of them, then I would say, go to the pub, have a celebration. It's worked. I mean, you're done. If everything you want has happened, then we're done.
So when do you introduce then, because kids have lots of behaviors, and maybe this was the top one that you work on.
Okay, perfect.
When would you introduce working on another one?
Whenever you feel like you have the ability to do that, or whenever you feel like the kid has the ability to take on another one. With some kids, they can do multiples at one time. Some kids, it's one. So we might make a decision here. This one is good enough. Let's refocus our energies back down to acquisition and fluency with this other behavior that we want to work on. You might have decided when you got to this point, okay, he's doing great. We're giving him a ton of reminders and prompts. I stand next to him all day reminding him, but he's doing great. Let's institute another one now. Or you might decide, no, we need to get at least up to here. But those are decisions you and your team have to make. So you could decide, forget this behavior, move on to the next one, or you could decide, let's go to generalization with this one and try the next one. It depends on what you guys all think is reasonable. What could we do to keep this kid successful?
So then you would,
go ahead.
So then you would have to go back and do another functional analysis of that new behavior? Okay.
Right. Functional assessments are for specific behaviors.
But for the next behavior, it might not need a full BIP. If it's not the first one, so
Might not. You know what I would always say, remember that continuum I think we talked about last time, which begins with instruction and classroom management. And then I'd go on to things like check-in, check-out. And only after all that would I go to looking at function. So behavior number one, we did a full FBA and we found function and we used it to create a BIP and it worked. Great, that was the big ugly behavior we were all concerned about. Let's go on to behavior number two, lower priority. And we look at that one, we go, that one's basically because he doesn't get math. We really need to redo math for that kid to work on behavior number two. Or you might say behavior number two is basically a problem because there's no management in that classroom. Or behavior number two would really be something that would probably respond just to check-in, check-out. Or behavior number two is just like the other one. Nothing else seems to be applying to it. We need to do an FBA. But I wouldn't go straight to FBA ever. I would always say, could we cure this with better instruction, better management, or something simple like check-in, check-out before I would say go on to do the FBA. The FBAs are time-consuming. They only use them when the simpler things don't make sense. Sherry, have some.
We work with a lot of students who transition to a new classroom in a new year, and the behavior magically disappears. And we've seen the pattern happen again and again. So our interpretation sometimes is that it's not necessarily the student, but some sort of teacher behavior that was contributing to the student's behavior. So if you want to look at the generalization or the adaptation, could you somehow look at what's being successful with the new teacher and what would the student do if confronted with another teacher in the future that's going to have the same patterns as the old teacher?
Well, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I like that. Instead of saying, hey, it's working, hands off, say, hey, it's working. Why is it working here when it wasn't working there? And say, what are these teachers, what are these settings, what are these have distinctly different? If they're absolutely the same, then I'd say a kid just matured. But if this teacher does a lot of this, and this teacher does a lot of that, and this seems to work, then I might say, put that in my pocket and remember it, because when he goes to teacher number 3, we might want to say to them, you know, in the past it's been real successful to do a lot of this. It's worth a shot. I think that's a really smart way to think about going after that.
I just wanted to ask if anybody else is having problems with classroom management. It seems like there's teachers that seem to have several students out of the classroom. You know it's the classroom management. And getting that teacher to change anything in the classroom is difficult because they want the child to change. So any suggestions on that? 'Cause, you know, we've moved some along, but then there's others, it's like, just fix them and leave me alone.
If I could answer that question, I would be very wealthy. You know, our secret with PBS that we don't yell out to everybody all the time, but the secret is PBS is not about changing kid behavior. It's about getting adults to do the things that change kids' behavior. We have a literature on what works for kids. We've had it for a long time. The literature we're missing is how to get adults to do. Seen it a million times. Teacher comes in, says, kid is horrible, having problems. And we go and we say, how's the kid with academics? You know, what do you ask him to do in math? Well, we're in algebra. Can they add? No, but this is what I expect in here, so you better make them do it. Well, if your instruction isn't set up to make that kid successful, then nothing is going to work. FBA isn't going to change a kid who's in an algebra class who can't add. It isn't going to work. So you've got to tell people, if you don't do these things, it's not going to work. Classroom management. If you can't manage that classroom in simple ways, it's not going to work. Where I think we end up losing this battle, and I don't have the solution to this, but what ends up happening is the kids do so poorly in these rooms, and these teachers argue so much with us that we end up putting them in a different classroom. And that teacher is now negatively reinforced